Every 5 minutes you
you heard of the Trust to Action? My name is Mukwa Jordan Wade Land. I was born June 21st, 1986. Currently 38 years old, half Ojibwe, half Inuk. My mother was in the 60 scoop, my father's was in the residential schools, and I myself was in 2 foster homes and 4 group homes. And what some would consider to be the modern day version of the residential schools or the continuing legacy of what they represent. I've been in and out of juvenile detention centers most of my adolescent years and done a lot of prison time in my adult years, 2 penitentiary bids. I've suffered with addiction and PTSD, multiple forms of it. What happened with my parents from the government and the schooling system and Children's Aid Society affected how they were as parents, and the intergenerational trauma was a very strong presence for my siblings and I, and we adopted a lot of those bad habits as we were being exposed and it being perpetuated on us from their experiences with the Canadian residential schooling system in 60 scoop. And, for a long time, I used that as an excuse to the reason why I was the way I was. I used to have a big chip on my shoulder, and I would take it out on society. I went through 6 different public schools by grade 7, and I was kicked out of all of them for fighting, and dealt with a lot of discrimination and racism. So did my brothers. At those times, it didn't matter what the situation was, we were the ones to blame. And so I also had a difficult time dealing with discrimination in the public schools in Ottawa. I spent all my teenage years, all my high school years in juvie. I ended up getting my GED after I went to achievement program. And it was at one point in my life where I was making an attempt to turn my life around. But I had reservations about the approach and program that I was in, and I still hadn't addressed certain traumas in my life. And due to my lack of dealing with those traumas, I let my emotions and circumstances get the better of me, and ended up doing what I considered to be the most significant sentence that I've done in my life. I've done 6 years in jail that I'm currently on parole for, and it was a huge eye-opener on how badly it is. I need to address those traumas, not just for me, but for my son's sake. I have an 11-year-old son that I'm working on being part of his life. Unfortunately, understandably so, his caregivers are hesitant in allowing me in his life because of how unstable and non-steadfast my life has been. I love him and I care about him very much, but I understand them trying to protect him and love him and care for him. So this is part of my healing journey in that respect, not only for myself, but so I could be a good example for my son and to get into my son's life. Now, I understand that 45 minutes can seem like a long time, and that it is quite a big chunk to sit there and listen to. Although, I didn't read all the calls to action at once. I read them bit by bit, and I recommend doing the same, listening bit by bit. You know, while reading these calls to actions, I got a lot of memories and flashbacks of my own experiences, and helped me to fan the flame of how important it is these calls to actions are. You know, on a personal level, I can definitely see how important it is that these calls to actions are not only recognized but worked on. You know, and me reclaiming back my life is how I'm reconciling my past with my present and future. Not all of you might not be able to relate to a lot of what's going on in the calls to actions, but it's not meant for that. You know, if you can relate, if there's a point in there that sticks out to you, that calls out to your heart, your spirit, then I would say that it's for a reason. And maybe it's something that you can contribute to, as I'm contributing in this manner. I encourage you to find within the calls to action what hits home to you and to expand upon it, contribute. Even sharing it with someone else could be that small contribution that can make a difference. And sometimes our contributions don't manifest until well after the fact, whether we know about it or realize it or not. I've had points in my life where I shared something difficult that I was going through, and I shared about how I was dealing with it, and someone who was too shy or scared to talk about it took my advice without me realizing it and came running up to me years later sharing about how my experience impacted and changed their life. And you never know how or when that's going to happen. And so I ask that you do it in that spirit. And I hope that any of you could get the same out of this that I'm getting out of it for myself. Miigwech.